late school morning. Heard the paper hit the door and I would pour a bowl of Lucky Charms and devour the sporting green. Then when I was a young man, cup of coffee and my...
Welcome to the 2-month review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter and 3%, in which we take a giant book, break it down bit by bit, section by section, talk about it, analyze, make jokes, have fun. I am Chad Post from Open Letter Books, joined as always by Brian Wood, author of Joytime Killbox.
Hello, hello. How are you?
How you doing this morning?
Not too bad. Can't complain.
Well, this season, oops, sorry. What's that?
Oh, I said I can't complain.
Oh, well, good. This season, our 20th season, we are covering Mulligan Stew by Gilbert Sorrentino. Today, we are going up to page 196 in the new version. I forget what it is in the older one. But this book is wonderful. I don't even know where to start. I read it all this morning because I had to write a couple articles yesterday. Yeah. And I finished those and I was like, I'm too tired to think through Mulligan Stew. So I read this all this section in like one fell swoop, and it's so good. It's so fun. Best way to wake up in the morning.
And then you got a little, an extra little bit of sugar with the baseball references in here. So
hell yeah,
right before the end, we get a scorecard, so that's fun. With baseball getting ready to go playoffs, and our team's not making it. Hooray!
our teams are shit. Well, my team in particular is shit. I also hope the Cubs blow it. That's all I'm hoping for, is the Cubs blow it, and that is the last like positive aspect I can root for in baseball this year. Unless somehow Seattle makes the playoffs, which they are shitting the bed as well. But anyways, yep, baseball on this one, but also a lot of fun games. So to set this up for anyone who hasn't been reading along, or maybe who has and just needs a refresher, Anthony Lamott is writing a book called Guinea Red. That is a kind of postmodern noir mystery about how Martin Halpin murders Ned Beaumont, who was his cohort in a publishing business, but then lost a lot of money by getting involved with two tawdry, possibly Mexican striptease artists or something else or something. I don't know what they really are. Bertha Delamond and Corey Coriendo. And that is his novel, which is a big failure and sucks. Lamont is a bad writer, is a bad experimental writer, has had 4 other books come out, all to no success. And within his book, his characters have started to rebel and are trying to escape, and have found in this section a particular loophole allowing them to go and investigate around them. So they're off doing that. Meanwhile, Anthony's writing letters to his sister, who is married to his nemesis, his writing nemesis, who he believes his writing nemesis is interfering with a professor who had expressed interest in teaching Lamont's books and is now coolly backing away from the Lamont disaster.
It's the only way Three Deuces isn't championed as much as it should. It has to be interference, clearly.
Definitely interference. Definitely DeMont like creeping in there. So I think that's all the background one really needs.
What's great with this is like we've gotten to the point where we're starting to maybe understand and recognize the patterns, and I think the author is great at really leaning into the patterns and letting us like just gobble them up. Because now it's like, before it's like, do you mind if I show you something? Can I show you some of my writing? And here it's like, if you read 100 to 103, 103 to 107, 118 to 121, and of Three Deuces, you'll see the quality of the writing is there, and then every chapter ends with the color blue, because he always does that. And there's still
so fun.
and his love of language. He's so good with doing different voices. We get terrible. and even the one that he reads from his friend, his nemesis or whatever, with the Irish. With the Irish Western and the dialogue, and it's like, oh my God, it's so great. It's so bad.
It's really spectacular. I want to talk about Dermont's thing for sure, because there's like it seems to parallel a couple other books, but yeah, it is, and there is like starting to be sort of, you see those counterpoints like we did last week, where like he gets a thing in the mail, and that sort of then is reconfigured into the book. And at the beginning of this section, we get the reference to Sheila having read Burst's love letters, and then him and criticizing it for all the reasons that we criticized it. Like I would, and he even brings it up before he gets your letter. He's like, you know, I bet the critics are going to be like, why does he have copies of these letters that he wrote to like these love letters he wrote to
do
like
people not have phones? Like, can you just not call anybody anymore? Or like what is the it's like the character's inability to suspend their disbelief of the parts they play is just, oh, it's so fun.
and then she's like also a lot of alliteration, maybe too much alliteration.
Oh, we'll find that part where it's all the B's and then all the G's.
Yeah,
he's so proud of himself, and he's so. I don't want to be like too vulgar, but like the best thing I can think of is it's like a circle jerk with the way the writers are into their writing and they're into their words and they're wanting to show like, can you give me the positive feedback that I want for how clever and how cool I am. And it's all awful and terrible and just go away. Can AI just replace all of us so that nobody has to go to another poetry reading ever again? That's kind of like the way these people feel, I swear.
It's a beautiful foreshadowing of what's going to happen next week. In a lot of ways. Yeah.
Oh, I cannot wait for the bad poet. Like that, talk about a cliffhanger to leave off on.
I know.
In the older version, it's page 165, but I stopped. I didn't look, and I just saw The Sweat of Love by Lorna Flambeau. And it's like, oh my God, this is going to be great.
It's delicious. But I found the bit where in the burst love letters, there is a faux advertisement or brochure, nudie picture brochure that is sent by Coriendo and Delmond to Ned, and some of the descriptions include gossamer garters that girdle her gorgeous gams and her bulging breasts almost bursting the bonds of her black brassiere. It's just like so over the top, but also kind of perfect. I love that. So Sheila's like, you know, this is kind of over the top. And then meanwhile, her husband Dermont writes to him and is like, yeah, could you give me that brochure that you used as like the kind of copy the thing that you use as your inspiration? I'd really like that brochure, you know, just for research.
So in this one, it was page 126, where he goes, alliteration in the brochure descriptions, perhaps. Some of your suggestions are quite good, and I will give them serious thought. I want to make sure in my mind that they ring true. That is, that they are the sort of thing that the writer of the brochure might truly say. Do you think that Coriendo wrote the brochure copy? Let me know. But I really do like the ring of gossamer garters that girdle her gorgeous gams and her bulging breasts almost bursting the bonds of her black brassiere. But let me think on them for a while. They may be a bit much.
That's the last thing I underlined was maybe a bit much. But then this also then hints at something that so we never really haven't gotten any of Lamont's actual real life past per se, just his failure as a writer. We don't know about his love with that, I forget what her name was from last week, that he writes the letter to, and he's like, I know you're married, but remember when we were hanging out that Christmas when I was writing Three Deuces and ignoring you and you were pissed about it. That was wonderful. And I'm deep into a new book. We should hook up. And then you get in here where he's replying to Sheila's letter about burst love letters. And he says, finally, how pleased I am that you see that these two are based on two young ladies we both once knew, to my regret. So there's a hint of that sort of darkness within there. And then it's interesting that he keeps receiving within his scrapbook, or maybe he's not receiving, maybe he's collected them, all these scam artists. It is just like the spam stuff from this time, but right now where the guy's like, hey, you could write a book about my psychic abilities, my ability to be tomorrowing, which I think that's a great phrase. Everyone who's a medium or a psychic should be like, I am good at tomorrowing. That's a way to do it. There is but he gets that, and the guy's like, also, I could if I had $30,000, I could pull up this ship that's worth $3 million. If you give me $2,000, I'll turn it into $50,000 per racetrack. There's all these nefarious money grubbing schemes that are sucking out the cash from both, I assume, Lamont, but also in the book from Ned Beaumont through his thing. So, and we get two chapters of Guinea Red in this section as well, just to lay that out. Where do you want to go first? I want to talk about Dermont's thing because that's up near the top.
It's right up to the front, yeah. Red Dawn and Blue Denim. This guy just crushes the titles. They're so good.
Blue. Everything is
blue. Blue in there. Yeah.
Got to get blue in there.
All right. Well, I just wrote, oh, wow, for this first opening scene. Flim rattled and churned sandily in Deuce's Noonan's throat as he casually worked it up into his gob, then salvoed it into the street with the same rattlesnake accuracy with which he was wont to fling his gleaming bowie knife on its deadly and more than occasional errands.
This whole bit is so overwritten. So the premise is that the premise of this novel is that that most people who went out west would have been first generation Irishmen. So they're like mostly Irishmen, speaking in a very bad Irish sort of way.
That's what makes it so important and avant-garde, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they have 3 of them. The script includes Deuce's Noonan, and I forget what the other names are.
O'Haggerty.
Black Danny McGlade and O'Haggerty. Yeah.
Sundog O'Haggerty. Yeah.
Sundog. Sundog.
His eyes leaping across the room at him like 2 Apaches crazed with firewater and hatred for the pale face. And here's what they sound like. Haggerty's voice softened to a surprisingly childlike rasp. Oh, I do. You're a lovely spitter altogether, begob. Maybe so.
I can't do the accent, but on the first page of it, there's a paragraph that begins, "It won't be spit you'll be needing." If you could do that one. Really... It
won't be spit you'll be needing to bring down a darling item like Big Cal, me boyo.
It's so good. And there's so many like similes. Everything is just loaded with similes, like, and which is, I know that Tarantino hated, like, I know that he was like very anti that sort of metaphorical writing, like things are what they are, just make them what they are. So like 3 men lapse into another silence as profound as midnight. Like everything's like the crest as gently as a senorita's voice. When his gob wasn't lobbing globs, it was spraying japes. Like it's wonderfully like overdone and like just so. And then there's like this amazingly lewd scene in the middle where like so they've murdered Big Cal, Nolan's dad. No, or Big Cal. Yeah, Big Cal is the one they murdered, and then whatever. His son is coming to get them. And he's leaving his wife, and his wife's like, if you leave me, I'm gonna go fuck the shoemaker. Like, we're over. At least the shoemaker would be married to me and not to his guns. And he's like, whatever, man's got to do what a man's got to do. Got to get that revenge. And then she has like a whole masturbation scene in the middle, which is like unnecessary to the entirety of this book. Just like sits there, and it's so funny because it's all about her basically being turned on by the concept of Boston.
I'm curious what like Sorrentino's thoughts are on like Tropica Cancer or something.
Oh yeah. I don't have something said with me, but we did publish an essay collection of his that includes like a lot of his remarks on different writers. I don't know. I don't remember. It's been 20 years. So I'll look though, when I get back to Rochester and pull it out.
I feel like, like in the 50s and 60s, like the edgy thing to do for these like white literary writers was to be like sexually explicit in a really to an unnecessary fashion. But and then to like, gush all of the all of the metaphors in the figurative language while doing it. So
yeah. So, but this section also, just because, I mean, I didn't look at the timing on all this, and I don't think that there's necessarily any real connection. But when I start reading this bit, the overwritten, the whole Western thing, it does remind me of Ishmael Reed's Yellowback Radio Broke Down, which is a postmodern Western, one of his earlier books. I want to say it was in the early 60s or early 70s, and in which like some of the cowboys are black. There's like a lot of like game playing with like the way that Westerns talk and the way that people interact, but it's very, very, very funny. And it's intentionally like, it's not poorly written. It's not badly written like this, but it is like playing with all the tropes and making fun of like all the Western tropes that are there, which this is like hints at, although focuses more on like that character nature. And we will get, this is also going to have a counterpoint of a series of Western characters talking about Westerns later on in the book, just to prime the pump for that. It's one of the funniest sections there is. So like seeing how this exists here is just going to lead into like it's going to pay off so well for anyone who's reading this.
Yeah.
Time. And that's weird about this book is that in some ways it's a joy to, like I say, it's a joy to read because I enjoy like going through and I'm just kind of laughing and giggling and whatever. But it is also like in some regards should be a slog because it's so bad. Like there's
it's very playful, but sometimes the joke rings a little longer than it needs to, which might make it feel that way. Like I would have been fine with like maybe 3 pages of the Western, but we get 6 or 8 or something. So he's having a good time with it.
Oh yeah, hog killing time.
I do like though this like reoccurring theme of like this distaste and the satire of genre fiction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right? I mean, like clearly like using Westerns and hard-boiled detective type stuff so far, but just like it's almost like if you're gonna be schlock. Like don't try to like play it off like you're some artist or something.
Yeah,
it's kind of the feeling I'm getting from it right now, but it might be too early to.
That totally tracks. And it really does. Like there are these parts that might seem like a bit of a slog, and then they pay off in like great ways as like little off jokes or like little explosive bombs. It's interesting. It's kind of in contrast to like what we talked about with like the difficulty of reading the remembered part and like its length and like the sort of like diatribal nature of that. This has a different set of like what makes it complicated is that it's asking you to be that ideal reader that Flaubert talks about, where like Flaubert had that infamous exchange with the woman who read Madame Bovary and was like, "You are such a genius. Like you captured my soul. This is me on the page." And he's like, "You idiot. This is like a satire. Like this is making fun of that sort of trope." And you're like, don't see that layer to it. Like this book is asking you to be that reader who's not reading this being like, okay, this is the first chapter of this book and this is quite interesting and so on and so forth. It's got to be like, no, this is like a joke. Like everything is a wink and a nod. And if you're not in on it and you're not reading it that way, it must be like the most baffling piece of literature to try and treat like earnestly, unless you just have really shitty taste in books and are like a really non-perceptive reader who's just like churning words through your eyes or something.
Yeah, because like there's a like Sorrentino is like he hates the writer.
Yeah,
and he's continually making fun of the writer. And I mean, just like something like with that letter just before the Western chapter where he goes, "It's difficult for me to see how the chapter can be juggled or recast so as to make C and D symbols for the decay of the country." Like you're taking these like over the top, people are trying to like do a sex scam and you want to make them symbolic of the moral decay or the decay of the like. It's like you think you're so important. You're doing something so big and so great. And the whole thing is just a stupid joke. And the whole thing is terrible. And it's like, don't take yourself so seriously. and we're all of us, including the characters in your work, are all laughing at you.
Yeah, the characters in your work are legitimately making fun of you.
You are as bad as we think you are.
It does sort of beg the question as to like who, if you were reading this in like a high school sort of situation, like who would you be identifying with? Who is your protagonist hero? And it would have to be Halpin, I believe. That is like the character who's like, get me the fuck out of here.
This is madness. Yeah.
I'm saying insane stuff, which to that point, like I love this line too, where he's talking in that letter to Sheila. He's like, yeah, it seems odd for Beaumont to keep copies of personal letters as well as business letters. I'm going to risk letting this all show the oily machinery. And furthermore, letting the machinery be as wild and as absurd absurd as a Rube Goldberg contraption. That's what I had in mind when I decided to let these letters lie as they are. It's the reader's problem, says I in my best Rube Goldberg voice. Rube Goldberg voice? Actually not something that anyone knows of. What does Rube Goldberg's voice sound like? I do too, like within that. So there's the one of the things that's interesting to me about the Western chapter is that it is following that idea of the hero's journey. So Cal is going to leave and going to travel to get his revenge. And but like even within that, there's no movement. They just go places. They're just suddenly places. And like the three characters are like, where is he? Like we figured he'd come right away. Like come guns blazing. And like he's still not here. So we're like just drinking in this bar, waiting for him to show up because he's fucking slow. And then Lamont's like, yeah, I gotta keep this going. I love that section. You know, this is my burst love letters, blah blah. I gotta keep the forward movement. Must keep the forward movement as best I can. And then we go immediately into the next chapter of Guinea Red of his book. And the entire thing is about how long it's taking the police to arrive at the cabin. And instead of having any forward progression of plot or narrative, it's like a million hypotheticals that matter not at all to anything. The police just aren't there. And this is like one of those great bits in like how long does it take for the police to get there until you write the line that the police are there? Like within fiction, like this doesn't make any sense. Time doesn't exist the way that it exists in real life in a book. Like that's part of the joy of art, putting things together. So he spends so much time, like maybe they got hit by a rock, or maybe like there's this detective happened to this. They stopped to get a beer. They went back for a beer. They went to this road. Maybe they took the throughway. I mean, they're policemen. They're pretty smart. They take the throughway, but then you'd have to take this road, and there's all these missing slats. It's so wildly digressive and just an eddy of nonsense. And then you get the bit later on where there's a reference where Ned tells Halpin that he's never called the police. There's nowhere in the book that he's ever actually called the police.
Got something here, yeah. There's just like maybe I'm overanalyzing, but there's even just like little choices that are so funny. Like for chapter 6, it's spilt ink and not spilled ink.
Yeah,
it's like if you want to be like just slightly more pretentious and important, you'll do spilt, right?
Exactly.
Let's go with the more like Englishy sounding one. For your
that is one thing I wanted to mention. I forgot in the Western on the new book, it's page 156, but there's a chapter or the paragraph that begins the third deuces, which is like the third comma deuces Noonan comma the youngest desperado, but third deuces shows up as our three deuces,
and
like
three deuces.
Separate reference to his book, which I think is
yeah,
obviously intentional and fun to play with. I do think that three deuces now keeps ringing in my mind as a title because there are so many of these pieces that kind of go together, and there are pairings that kind of go together that you see. So maybe there is something more structurally baked in through that particular title. But it's really also Jigsaw Puzzle shows up again immediately.
As he does say, he is quote I'm a doggedly experimental writer. So
oh God. And he also has apparently contacted Daisy, who's coming to this cabin, this cabin is still like just a mystery of like, why does this exist? Where is this? What is going on? Why are all the letters there? That begs a question for this later chapter. Let's just stick with his things for 1 second. So he has chapter 7, which is only a couple pages long. The Wood's So Wild, in which it begins. So then I went to the club, set my heels to the sidewalk, down through the crowded streets. The day turned to night, shadows etching the city. When the fuck would this take place? Like, I know that like Lamont's a terrible writer and everything is like muddled anyways, but like the sequence of events seems to make no sense if unless the cabin or the reading the love letters part is a flashback to a different point in time, that afterwards he goes to the club to meet the two women, and then the cabin thing is happening later. But like it really just feels like he's just like, oh, here's another, whatever.
Well, again, like if we go back a little bit to his notebook, it says, at this point in my extreme nervousness, the spectral wind howled about the cabin. I spilled the bottle of ink all over the paper on which I had tried unsuccessfully to objectify my horror, my guilt, my unrequited love, my wretched botch and stain of life, or on which I am trying to do the same. Do tenses matter? He's saying in his notebook. And like we talked about before, like, wait, this is like shifting around. It makes no sense. And like there's this, like, sure, like be experimental, but like it's absolutely incoherent. And
this is great. Feverishly, I began to mop up the stain with my handkerchief, somehow less terrified by the macabre red stains upon it than I was by the fact that the color of the ink I had spilled was washable blue.
Blue. I circled it. Oh, great. More blue.
But yeah, so in his other part in The Woods Are So Wild, he goes to the Club Zap, which should be the Zap Club in every intent, but the Club Zap is kind of wonderful. To meet Corey and Bertha, he bribes someone to get to the back. The guy that he bribes, the head waiter, speaks in some sort of I know speak the English.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's so good.
French.
It's so bad.
I think he's supposed to be French. And then
I know speak the English. I reached into my wallet.
Hey, Jacques, well done. And he sees
you at last come, sure, man of no joy. Gaze on my matchless shape in these darkling nightclub. In these darkened nightclub. Come in the room, sit by my lustrous body for pleasure.
Also, what is she's supposed to be from Mexico, perhaps? Like this is
I'm
all
not
like
sure. Ned Beaumont shall return to lovely Corey. True, Duck. It's almost like Creole sounding at one point. Like, what is this?
It's so wild. And then so that I prayed for help from God in the faraway blue.
More blue.
Loving that blue, deep into that blue. Yeah, it's so fun. So he has his 2 chapters, which are really nonsense. But that one where he walks to the club is paralleled by Halpin's section, which in Halpin's notebook has the character within Guinea Ride, within Lamont's book, goes on a walk himself, and he walks to the town where he meets the nearby town where he meets Clive Solace. This is set up by Ned Beaumont coming up with a theory of DeSelby's, which I firmly believe is a reference to DeSelby, who is a character within the Flann O'Brien universe, where a lot of these names and characters are coming from, including Demont Trellis and Anthony Lamont. And Selby is like a wild philosopher / scientist, quote unquote. And in The Third Policeman, for instance, his theories are throughout. And one of them is that like in this town where the main character is in Third Policeman, everyone's riding their bicycles all the time. It's Irish. And his theory is that anytime that you tap something, things come in contact, molecules are exchanged between the two, because everything's like, made of air and it's not solid, so on and so forth. And so every time you're riding your bike, you're exchanging molecules with the bike and your butt. So the bike is becoming more human and you're becoming more bike-like. And this is like, so people ride their bikes too much, go and like park themselves at counters.
Into bicycles. Yeah.
Into bicycles. So DeSelby's like a wildly fun, crazy, like idea generation machine. He's also in the Delkey Archive prominently as a character who can like, forget if he like speaks to philosophers and time travels in some weird way. Anyways, it also is, there's a artist, Hoser, I guess, that made an album recently that has 2 songs that are about DeSelby, and they're references to Third Policeman. So interesting, like real life come up. But anyways, so DeSelby's theory is that somehow if you're talking about the past, there's like a time travel element to it, so you can move in the future and the present. It's all bullshit. All this description of like how they're able to like free themselves is nonsense. But basically, Ned Beaumont,
if one thinks of a person as that person was in the past, that person is in the past. So okay, there
we go. So either way, Ned Beaumont's like, you know what? We don't both need to be here. Like you, I'm dead. You're like doing fucking nothing.
You be me and I'll just leave.
Just don't worry.
And the author will never know.
There's even a reference later on where when he meets Clive Solace, and Clive Solace is like, oh yeah, a lot of characters escape and just stay here. And then their writers go back to write and they're like, well, my character's gone. And so they have to like digress into all sorts of. It
kind of has like that like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead sort of vibes, right?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
What is our utility here? Why are we here? Why are we in this story? We're like never in this story, so we can just do whatever we want. Let's go exploring.
Oh my god, yeah. And here's the part where he's like, it seems I've been doing little more than waiting for the police, actually. And Ned points out that Lamont has not yet directed me to call them.
This one just had me cracking up. The one person alive in this cabin is Martin Halpin, myself. I carry the entire burden of the story.
Oh my god, it's so good. So good. He also meets someone along the way. He had the remarkably, well, this is Clive. I had the remarkably good luck to meet a man who once worked, slaved, he said, in one of Lamont's earlier books. Oh man, but this is cool too because this emphasizes the sort of like, again, the fictionality and the problems with like how we treat fiction as real is that because nobody ever describes the town outside or the world outside of the cabin. When he goes out there, everything's like, yeah, there are trees, but there's no specificity to them. They're just like Crayola crayon looking trees. And the sun's always shining no matter what time of day. It's always overhead and in back, and there's no shadow, and it never changes. It's like because there's no attention, there's no writing to it. It doesn't. Nothing happens. It's just
And I think I like the Halpin parts, and I definitely agree with you. Like that's probably like our vehicle as far as if we were to like hitch our wagon to a protagonist, it'd probably be Halpin. And then like he's the one that gives us like the little nuggets of truth. Like in the old version on page 154. He mentions that talking about Solace, he seemed annoyed at Mr. Joyce, but I refused to assent to his feelings since I maintain that the man used me fairly and with kindness. And it's like when I talk to other writers or myself or people that are when I'm teaching classes, it's like treating characters fairly and with kindness rather than just as little puppets or things that you dangle around for your own fulfillment, self-enjoyment, whatever. That's bullshit. Right? Like you have to treat the character like you would not have them saying things like "me no speak the English" if you're treating characters with fairness and with kind. You know what I mean? Like that's the truth. That's the real stuff right there. And it's Halpin that's giving us that, and nobody else.
Yeah, exactly. He's he's like the real critic in a sense, and as well. Yeah, and that's wonderful. I love that little bit because it does references Ulysses, in which both characters are named. And then like references to like, I don't know that we ever met, but in that world, like nobody really knows where everyone crosses. You can't keep that shit straight. Like it's all over the place, which is wonderful. And I like how Clive Solace also hates Lamont so much.
everybody does.
Oh my God. And then so there's the great jokes about like, oh yeah, when the characters leave and decide just to stay in this town, which is a safe place because it is, quote, Lamont said, or he assured me that Lamont would never find me here since the poor place existed in a typescript locked away in a trunk in a Poughkeepsie attic. So they're safe in this like draft world in this Poughkeepsie attic. And that's where like you stay there, the character, the author loses touch with the character. And then of course, Solace takes him to a baseball game. Extraordinary, although he doesn't understand the game. He gave me a scorecard that a spectator left behind. I'm including my next entry, and perhaps Ned will be able to interpret its incomprehensible code for me, which we do get as just like essentially after Halpin says like, shit, I'm working, now I'm jabbering some garbled and natural English. Will this man not leave it all be? Then he includes a scorecard, which is like chaos, and has all these notes on it, namely game called after third because of drunken condition of both teams, and has like little notes underneath each team's scorecard. Basically, it was 8-8, 5 errors on one side, 6 on the other, and one of them says Forster's 3 Ks on account of dozing at bat.
Well, I love the players. Smirnoff, Gordon. So you got vodka and you got gin.
Tanqueray,
Wilson, Tanqueray, Bombay. Oh man,
Overholt.
And then we have it's a bunch of writers' names and a bunch of liquor names, right? With Harper,
like
Fitzgerald, yeah,
Daniel.
And so they're all drunks.
They're all trying to play baseball. And like the scorecard's illegible at the top, but there's just like Smirnov is just scoring all the runs. But it's so good.
Tanqueray drove in first run, hit Forrester on back. So Forrester got hit with the Tanqueray, and then Forrester has 3 Ks on account of dozing at bat. He's clearly just having a really good time. I mean, this is a lot of work to like figure all this stuff out and play these games and fill out the scorecards. And oh man,
I did mean to ask you too that like since your new forthcoming novel or novel you're working on involves Vegas, there is a Vegas scene here.
Oh my God, it's so great. Yeah, it's so bad.
Oh yeah, so
bad.
I want to hear your take on the Vegas scene. Did you go to the Golden Nugget for research?
No, that's the old strip. So yeah.
That place is fun. The old strip parts are great.
Oh, I love the old strip's great. It's like where just dreams are dead. It's
oh
awesome.
my god, there's a I can't think what it's called.
It's so dusty and dingy. We went there because my daughter wanted to ride one of the rides on top of the Strat, and then you just go there and like you just want to take a shower after you walk around. It's pretty awesome.
I had to be there for an ALA conference some years ago. It's in the American Library Association in Las Vegas, which if you could think of two things that don't go together more than that, I praise you. But I took like because based on Mark Benelli recommendation, Mark Benelli, great writer, friend of the podcast, he had recommended this one particular bar/restaurant in the old strip area, and it took a bunch of like the consortium people and my friend Caroline Casey there, and it was like little fires, circular, like pink kind of velour seating, all dingy, so old, and basically the place where like magicians go to die, like the saddest but most spectacular place I've ever been. Like everyone in there was clearly a retired magician, just like waiting it out with shitty, cheap booze and pink velour. So.
No, I'm kind of highlighting and like aping more of the family friendly aspect of Las Vegas, which I think is like even more like criminal and incredible and amazing. So
and highly charged capitalism.
Yeah, no, I'm more about the family friendly alcohol abuse, sex trafficking, and crippling gambling edition part. I want the Disney version of it.
Fair. The Disney Vegas.
Yeah, exactly.
The Giuliani Vegas.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I do like in that scene, which is just essentially nonsense. It's like what is his name? Tab Giuseppe.
Oh, yeah.
Tab Giuseppe and his buddy Billy, good old Billy, my buddy, go into a place. They're gonna get like the gambling place. I don't know why. I don't know what the hell is supposed to be happening in the scene. I missed something, but it's just like whatever. Billy's losing all of Tab Giuseppe's money, drinking Bloody Marys, and then Giuseppe goes and pukes all over his own car. But the best line in here is he's like, Billy's like, you want to go somewhere else? And he's like, sure, why not? That Bloody Mary settled my stomach real good, I lied. But you hardly drank it. Billy pursued relentlessly as a lighthouse. That is as relentlessly as a lighthouse.
Oh man,
this shit is gold. Like there's a way that you could pepper your speech with these sort of like, they're not malapropisms, but they're just like nonsense sort of like metaphors and cliches that aren't cliches. It's just genius.
Yeah,
genius.
Just perfectly bad.
Yep, absolutely. So I know that you have to get going. So do you have a favorite line? I didn't mark.
Oh man, there were so many. How about this one? This will set us up for where we're going next week.
Yeah,
where we start next week. In the old version, it's on page 156. It's a letter to his dear Sheila. I cannot think of another novelist of my age and with my publishing credits, if credits they be, so abysmally and universally ignored. One might think that I were a poet.
Yeah, poetry. Here we go. My favorite, I have two, but they're on the same, essentially same page. So there's the sections again in a scrapbook where there's all the questions with the really truly random answers to them, which goes back to the beginning where he receives in the mail someone being like, you can exercise your imagination and your creativity. You'll be receiving these questions that will like give you like, you know, work your brain, your imagination muscles. So within that, there's one that's like, why are these people taking their hats off? Again, in whatever dialect that's supposed to be. And one of them is the Phillies have won the pennant. One of the responses, which that's a shout out to my Phillies fans out there. But the one that I like the best is, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? And it's just a huge mathematical equation using cosines and cube roots and equaling and like 0, 1/2, or 1
or one chord.
One chord. So funny. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. So anything you want to plug or mention before we go for this week?
No, nothing fun this time. Just can't wait for Lorna Flambeau.
Lorna Flambeau is the best. I've been reading a lot of books, new books for this class that I'm teaching, and I have to say the new Jonathan Lethem book, Brooklyn Crime Story, double thumbs up. For anyone who's listening, it comes out next week, technically, but it's really spectacular, very fun, very interesting construction and tone to it. So next week we actually will have a guest. If all works out, Tom Flynn will be joining us, and we'll be going in the new book up to page 261, and in the old one up to page 221. And we will be doing some. This is a really wild ass section. For anyone paying attention, I will tease this a little bit. We not only get the poetry, we also get a play that existed outside of this book that Sorrentino wrote and then put into this, that is based on the masque or the fugue play that's inside of Ulysses. So this is going to be a chaos section to talk about, and really wonderful. There's too much. I can't unpack all of it by any means, but I think we'll have a lot of fun talking about the discarded wiener and Laura Flambeau's sweat of love. So till then, rate, review us, follow us on X and Instagram or whatever, and tell your friends. All that helps. Thank you very much for listening. Buy the book, support Open Letter, support Teleki Archive, and we'll see you next week.
I keep my eye on the sparrow, keep my focus pretty narrow. I listen to the music and read books about its makers. I read books about baseball, the swingers and the takers.